All right. And with that, we will get started. My name is Hannah Diggs Elliott. I am a member of the Graduate Student Assembly, and I'm also the rep to the Systems Thinking and Change Division. And I'm here today with my co-moderator, Sheila Murphy, where we're going to discuss leveraging systems thinking and instructional design and technology with our esteemed panel.
And let me go ahead and introduce the esteemed panel. We're very pleased to have the perspectives of Samantha Blevins from Radford University, from Aaron Bond at Virginia Tech, and from Suha Tamim at the University of South Carolina. And we will be posing very specific questions and gaining the views of our panelists. We're delighted to have graduate students here and the panelists to look at what's possible with systems thinking, and it's a very exciting topic because it can do so much for us. There's an inherent combination here of theory and practice. The very title, Leveraging Systems Thinking in Instructional Design and Technology, means both theoretical and practical value, so very exciting for us to be doing this. So with that overview, I'll turn it right back over to Hannah. We'll jump into our questions.
All right, we want to start with introductions from the panel. And if you don't mind, in addition to introducing yourself and telling us about yourself, also tell us about the role that systems thinking has had both in your education and in your practice.
So perhaps we can start with Samantha, if you don't mind.
To find my mouse. So I'm Samantha Blevins. I am an instructional designer and learning architect at Radford University, which is very close to Virginia Tech. Most people are more familiar with Virginia Tech. We're here in the New River Valley of Virginia. Even though my title is instructional designer, my position has kind of morphed more into helping faculty connect with each other, network, helping them along their professional development journeys. So my title hasn't changed, but that's kind of what I do. So I do have a very cool title. So I don't think that a school with like engineering or architecture would be able to get away with learning architect in their title. So, I have been involved in systems thinking and change, the division, for I want to say 4 or 5 years now. I really love this division. I'm very passionate about connecting with other people who are always thinking about how a system works and how all the pieces are interconnected. And as a faculty development type person now, I'm always thinking about what are we offering to our faculty? How does it connect with where the direction of the university and what is currently happening, our current state of affairs. So I'm going to pass it to Aaron Bond.
Thank you. Thank you.
Or passing the baton, or it's like a relay race.
Yes.
My name is Aaron Bond. I'm currently the Senior Director of Professional Development Network for Virginia Tech, and I'm Interim Senior Director for Instructional Design and Innovation and Outreach at Virginia Tech. That's a lot of things that mean really nothing. If you look at the systems view within the university, we are strategically placed to influence technology integration and innovative strategies for and pedagogies for faculty to improve the student learning experience. And systems thinking has played a huge component in my life in various leadership roles in education, trying to understand where I fit within the system and what I can influence and what I can change within that system, and particularly how people within that system can be influenced to bring about change.
Thank you, Aaron. How about Suha?
Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm Suha Tamim. I'm from the University of South Carolina. I'm a clinical assistant professor there, so I'm mostly teaching. But I have a background, like kind of a varied background. I started in public health with health promotion and health education, and then I moved to instructional design and I got my doctorate in instructional design, and now I'm teaching curriculum studies. There's kind of a lot of varied roles, but the main thread is education and all of that. I got involved with systems thinking and change division like Samantha maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I learned a lot from the question asking about the role of systems thinking in my education and my practice. In my education, I would say it was like brush over systems thinking from public health and instructional design. Like you hear about it, you know that you have to think about systems, but you don't really understand it until you really dig deep into it. So now that we are with the division and trying to educate ourselves about it, and me teaching a course on organizational change in education, so I'm really learning much more into systems thinking, and I try to apply it in whatever I do. Not like Aaron and Samantha, because I don't work with other faculty, I just work with students, but this is where I am.
Thank you. So the way you notice everybody, there's a positively infectious sense of systems thinking. We have the potential, I heard certain language, we heard the word architect, the word outreach, the word influence, the word education, innovative strategies, and change. Those pieces of language situate us in our potential. And just briefly in my own sphere as a moderator, I'll make it brief, that our work in consulting in particular means shaping opportunities for strategic design with a systems view, using that as a framework that underpins that kind of beautiful potential with respect to public sector boards, for example, councils that are elected by the people, that sort of thing. So the idea of systems thinking, it changes how we look at what we do. And so with that, let me turn it back over to Hannah as we go into some direct questions. Mute. Hannah, I think you're
And I'm muted. I'm muted. I muted myself. All right. This question's more focused on design. To what extent does systems thinking connect with design thinking in your work? I know for me, as both a student and a practitioner, you hear the phrase instructional systems design a lot, but what does that mean in the context of our practice, and how does systems thinking relate to that?
Any of the panelists wish to jump in or be called on?
So when I started my I don't know, maybe in my first or second year in the systems thinking and change division, I made the mistake of saying, well, it seems like those are pretty much the same thing, design thinking and systems thinking. And one of the senior leaders was at the time was like, no, that is not what that is. There's a heck of a lot of overlap between those two things, Hannah. And the true theorist would probably say those are really different. But design thinking looks at problems, and particularly wicked problems, in much the same way that a systems thinker does, right? I think systems thinking would argue that they try to dig into the system in a different way than someone who's doing design thinking, where much of systems thinking is changing a system, and maybe not even around a particularly wicked problem, just a simple problem to solve. But it still involves critically thinking about where the problem sits within the system. So that's my take on it, but I'm sure there's others who have.
Aaron, you just said something that I think focuses us on the proactive dimensions. That's where the design thinking in part comes in. We're not just describing what is, we're advancing what could be. And that inherent element of design thinking in shaping systems is quite instructive. How about other panelists?
I'll add to what Aaron is saying. You know, currently I'm not working in instructional design, but you know, it's design in general. So I design my courses, so it could be on a small scale or a big scale. So I think the idea, if you want to start to learn about systems and systems thinking, that systems can be huge and small, even at the level of my own course. And then I'm designing the course, which is online, complete online, asynchronous. So I'm thinking about the system, I'm thinking about the student, the technology, you know, all of these different aspects. So this is how you have to look at the parts and the whole in systems thinking when you're designing. Because design takes also, you're considering several layers, right, when you're designing something. So it could be big scale or small scale.
Very, very useful.
Yeah, I think Suha brings up a good point. I mean, design thinking is all about thinking with different lenses, and systems thinking is taking those lenses and figuring out how each of those different ways of looking at a problem really affects an entire system, and thinking those things through. So they definitely complement each other, but they are kind of different when you really dig down into it.
Can you think of a situation where you have had to do, you know, our typical design thinking processes and also consider the systems as part of that?
So my designing mostly relates to faculty development opportunities at our university. But I do know that when I design, let's say I design a faculty development opportunity for thinking about social justice, if I'm designing it for someone who is voluntarily taking it, that class may look a lot different than someone who's been told they have to take it. And it's been mandated by the university. So it can be more organic and more conversational and more exploratory sometimes if it's a voluntary situation. But I don't really know where I'm going with it after that. Our university is very organic. We're very volunteer, exploratory. We don't get voluntold a lot to do things, so, which is nice.
The word, you know, the word outreach comes up a lot when it comes to design and the sort of work we do, because, for instance, social justice that you just mentioned, now boards working in workforce development for us are eager to hear from all parties. And as you well know, in our culture right now, when it comes to law enforcement, among other areas, we want to hear from everybody. And the idea of unifying perspectives, including people, is inherently part of systems thinking for us. And I know it because public sector happens to be our arena, it's a big deal. Others on this design thinking, any further thoughts?
I just an example of how we have used it at Virginia Tech. So we have quite a few service models for the different services that our units provide. And so we've used design thinking methodology to think through service design and to do journey maps and to walk through the experience of our customers, who are faculty mostly, but some to make sure that we are providing services that meet their needs. And so I don't know that it was, and I don't know that it drastically changed the system, but it changed the experience of those who were coming to us for a service. So that's one way that we've used design thinking to try to influence the system, but it wasn't on a large scale.
Thank you. Maybe we can move to the next question at this stage, just as an introductory piece of how do you persuade others in your department or university of the utility of systems thinking? This is where the sales hat comes on here, and we say we're not necessarily strong arming, but gently influencing and inspiring, shall I say, others to see the potential value. So how do you do this? Anyone wish to weigh in on this among the panelists?
Sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
Go ahead, Suha.
Or I'm just like, say something very kind of, you know, big picture kind of thing. So, you know, systems thinking for somebody who's not familiar with it is going to be like kind of overwhelming, difficult to understand. So for me, I'm not at the point where I'm convincing my colleagues about the using systems thinking. But the way, you know, when you talk about a topic, you know that if you want to solve a problem, address an innovation through systems thinking, you're going to have to look at all the parts and see the relationship and the connections between them. So maybe the way I drive the conversation, you know, try to look at these other different parts and how they work with each other. Maybe this is how I influence them, but I'm not at the level where I can really use systems thinking, and let's do systems thinking, you know, when we solve whatever we're working on.
What you say, Suha, brings to mind the question we often ask: who else needs to be at the table as we talk about whatever it is? Who else needs to be here? Others.
Yeah, I don't know that I try to influence people to use systems thinking as much as I use systems thinking to influence people. Systems thinking gives you some tool sets and I guess tools in your pocket around understanding people, and I know Suha can probably expand on this much more than I can, but understanding people's mental modes and getting into where they are within the system, how they feel about their place in the system, and also understanding their ability to change, or their why they may be resistant to change, is a huge part of systems thinking. So I think, I don't know that I try to influence people to use systems thinking as much as, again, I use it to influence.
It's very insightful. Thank you. Samantha, how about you?
So I'm in a unique position as someone who leads an organization called Idea X. It's local to the Mid-Atlantic region, mostly Virginia, North Carolina. It's the Instructional Designer Education Alliance Exchange. But within that group, I think it was 2 years ago, we decided we wanted to meet more than once a year, and that we wanted to focus our conversations around a particular topic or book. And since I had to lead that, I picked Switch. It was a really great systems thinking and change introductory book. If you haven't read it yet, I'll grab the link to the book and pop it in the chat in just a few minutes. But so a lot of instructional designers and faculty development folks from across Virginia and North Carolina got together, and we had really great conversations surrounding the book, to the point that a couple of faculty members who were involved in those conversations brought it back to our university. So and had book groups with their departments surrounding the this book, and really thinking about systems thinking and change. And so even though I didn't it was kind of roundabout as the way it came back to my university, it has been really cool to see faculty start using those terms and really thinking about, well, how does what I do affect our university and our department and our university and our students as a whole. So it was covert systems thinking and change seeding. So I'll grab that link for you guys.
Embedded systems thinking. It's great. And you know, the thing is, your mention, Samantha, of vocabulary is something we have found extremely useful as people use terms like complementarity, meaning all perspectives are simultaneously valid and incomplete, and things of that nature help people just kind of snap into it, and it really helps. Maybe we can move to the next question.
All right. In terms of change, what role does systems thinking play in the design of overall change initiatives in your experience?
I know, Aaron, you mentioned this earlier, and others too, but maybe you'd like to start us off if you don't mind.
30.
Have you on mute there, Aaron?
So it was funny, Alexa was telling me that I had a notification, and so I was purposefully on mute. Right beside of my computer. No, Alexa.
She'll be with you for life. I don't know. It's troubling.
I tell you, that's one of the funny things that
Would you like to add it to your cart?
Oh,
Aaron's purchasing things, folks. Watch out for Aaron.
okay, no. I'm going to go back on mute and I'll let somebody else answer for a minute. Okay.
That's great.
So for April's Fool Day, like April, whatever that was, I actually did that all day long on Zoom meetings. I would say the word, a word, and just to get something started on some, if I could get someone that device to open and say something. So if we're in this situation again next year, you can do that. So there's your April Fool's. In the design of change initiatives, I don't think any change initiative is going to be successful unless you look at everything that you can within the system to understand what that change is going to do. One change in one area may have consequences in other areas. So you have to think about the relationships that are across the organization, across the system, and you can't plan for everything, but you should get buy-in from as many people as you can, because the people are going to be the folks implementing the change or affected by the change. And to be honest, you need to be as transparent as you can with those people.
Well said, very helpful. Others?
I'll just, repeat what Aaron has said. You cannot think of change like I see a problem and I think this would be the solution for it, and then I'm going to go ahead and carry on with, designing and developing the solution and implementing it. Because if you don't have the system, all the key players who are affected by it with you on the same page with the same vision, change is not going to be successful. So this is why it's so important, and this is why lots of change initiatives fail, because they're like guided by one person.
Right. Small perspective or just one lens. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think multiple voices are really important, just as multiple perspectives are really important when you are really trying to lead a change initiative. I've been able to do it covertly, but not explicitly. But Aaron's point that you should be explicit and upfront is a much better strategy than trying to sneak things in on people.
That's the old way that we've seen, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when we say systems thinking, sometimes there's kind of an obsession right now in some locations about just processes, not the full system. Like, how can we do this one little process better? And multiple process enrichment initiatives going on within a given organization. But in fact, looking at the biggest picture and how they all hinge together to do just one thing in a connected way, that's the art form and very challenging. So we've had some good thoughts there. Should we move to the next question here, Hannah?
In terms of starting small, what are some small steps and changes that we could potentially make in our processes in design thinking to include a systems thinking approach? Like, what could we go and do today that would make a difference and sort of incorporate systems thinking in what it is that we do, whether it be our research or practice, et cetera?
That's a really good incrementally based question that I think we need to, reality for most of us is incremental, and seeing success and building upon small successes to give courage, to give clarity, to identify what might be also. And so if anyone would like to just identify a specific situation in your arena from among the panelists, that would be great. Anyone wish to share that?
Hannah, are you asking from like the graduate students, from your perspective now, your position? I think the first I would do if I were you is to read about the topic a little bit, because it's very complex and you can drown in it. And I still sometimes feel that I'm drowning in the literature and trying to understand, because I was not trained in that. I know Sheila and Tracy, you are trained and you work with you have real clients you work with. So, but it is it's simple yet complex, and this is in our division. We've been talking about that a lot. Trying to spread the message. What is systems thinking? it's very logical, but it's also complex. So read about it. And then once you read about it, then you will be able to understand all the kind of approaches that you could take. There are some tools that you could use and things like that. So you have to, we talk about mental models and systems thinking. You have to develop your mental model about systems thinking and what it is in order to be able to use it.
Suha, you know, the one Bible, this book, it's probably showing backwards, but Garajadaji, the book called Systems Thinking, Managing Chaos and Complexity. It's the 3rd edition from Morgan Kaufman, and we can share that link, is one, I'll say, really foundational text that I find extremely enriching because it's just plain smart. Tracy's dissertation, as most of you know, is about to be finalized and defended very soon within a month. So good for Tracy. But this is systems implementation is really, speaking of drowning in the literature, Tracy has made sure that I'm drowning in the literature at all points, and I'm very happy to be that way because I learn every minute. But when we watch this in implementation with others, it's extremely exciting. It's one of those like the Etch-a-Sketch toy when some of us were children, others of us weren't even thought of yet. Start anywhere. You know, you can begin anywhere on that screen and design something. It's like that. We can find change. We can find systems connectivity toward one main goal, all kinds of places. So very exciting in that way. Other perspectives on starting small from any of the panelists, and we'll soon jump into all the questions from different other attendees here.
And Samantha, I'm probably going to need you to help me, or Suha, or even Sheila. You were all a part of a book club recently, and the book was a system thinking for social change, or I may have butchered that title, but it's one of my favorite books.
No, thank you, Samantha.
It is one of my favorite books, and it really brought home for me. There's just one example in that book that I use over and over, and it's about it's about the prison system and how that there's so many pieces to reforming the prison system. There's so many things in that system, and there's no way to solve and actually make meaningful change without addressing all of those different pieces in the system that have to change. And so, and that seems overwhelming, right? My suggestion would be to think about where you fit in the systems that you are in, and understand your place in the system, and look around for the pieces of that system that you can influence, that you can change, and watch what happens. Just pay attention. If I do this in my system, what am I doing? What's happening? And be self-reflective and understand how that happens, and then that will, but you will probably become a systems thinker. As Sheila said, iteratively, you'll start doing it more often, and you'll start paying attention to those little things that you can do that has effect and influence.
Excellent, Aaron, very helpful. Samantha, how about you?
Yeah, I think Aaron brings up a really good point, that it doesn't come naturally at first. It's just like being a reflective writer or thinker. It's not something we do naturally, but we have to you have to be diligent at first, and then over time, you really will think about, oh, if I make this one change, then how will it affect the whole system? I did pop the link to the text that Aaron mentioned in the chat. And I did want to mention that Hannah and Todd are going to be running the book group for this fall. We haven't met yet because, chaos, the world is chaos right now, and selected a book, but they're going to be helping run that book group this fall. And hopefully we'll continue to have really great conversations around systems thinking and change. I did want to say that my very first My very first one, I dipped my toes in the waters for systems thinking, was with Everett Rogers' book on diffusion of innovation theory. And it is giant, but when you read it, you're like, oh, wow, this really makes sense. And so that's not a book that I've heard mentioned, but it's also a really great book. Don't buy it. They have it at the library. Go check it out when you can do that again, and just kind of look through it. You don't need to read the whole thing, but it is kind of a really nice, just dip your toes in, really think about it. So.
Very enriching, and thank you. You know, I was just thinking, I couldn't help mentioning from Aaron's point about prison system here in Arizona, just as an FYI, we have a huge initiative to reduce recidivism by 25%. And so many things like second chance workplace initiatives, workforce development initiatives for the system to try to help people get prepared. And they've even changed the name of the agency. It's not just Department of Corrections, but I can't get the R&R proper at this moment, but basically transforming people's lives toward rehabilitation and learning so that they can be productive members of society again. And the idea is, even though that's vast, I don't presume to say that will do everything, but the point is it's a small step that helps people think, where are we going? What are we trying to do? Then the things like employment development come into focus for people, and we can understand it better, all of us in Arizona. So that's just something. Hannah, it sounds to me like we're just about ready to entertain open questions. Am I right?
I do, yes. But I did want to make one comment from my perspective as a graduate student and as a practitioner. Systems thinking, once you start to get into it, and we spent a lot of time with Ellsworth this semester in one of my courses. So we went through a lot of the different change models, which, you know, a lot of them have a very large systems component. What you start to realize is, oh, I do this almost every day. It's all about just being open and making those connections and realizing that your space and your decisions have reach outside of your immediate view. And that has really resonated with me and with my work. And I think that this division and these wonderful panelists we've had here today really play a large role in helping us realize the value in having multiple voices and promoting our organizations through our actions, through our cooperative actions. And it's been amazing. So
you occupy that space that fuses practice and the theory based upon your excellent work as a practitioner and as a person in the doctoral program, Hannah. It's very nice to have you because you're pivotal in what you're doing. So that's quite enriching for us here.
And with that, I think,
questions.
Yeah, let's move on to some questions. You all can either use the Q&A function or put them in the chat, whichever you'd prefer.
I see Kiran asking, how do you analyze the systems thinking initiatives at an organization? Any frameworks to go by? Anyone wish to provide guidance on this point?
I'll try to answer that one. Once again, you know, if you go back to the literature, you'll see different kind of models of systems thinking, if you wish. So there are different ways if you want to choose the one that you're most comfortable with. But lately, you know, there's Cabrera and Cabrera. They have a totally different kind of perspective on explaining systems thinking, because they talk about like concepts, like how systems are, you know, parts and whole and interrelated. Every part is a whole by itself, you know, as, you know, these complex concepts. But they talk about different perspectives, distinctions that people make. So it's more of a conceptual way of looking at the system than the parts of the systems themselves. So Cabrera, which the first time I read it was kind of confusing, but now that I understand it a little bit more. So that would be somewhere I could start. And Senge is another resource, the fifth discipline of Senge, and he talks about systems thinking, and he gives tools on how to do that. So these are the two models that I'm comfortable, that I understand and I can use.
Thank you, Suha. Tracy has a perspective, I think, on that matter. Would you like to share, Tracy Reginald?
Well, just from my reading and understanding, and from the world of engineering, there's also systems analysis, and that stems from the Rand Corporation going back many decades. But systems analysis would take a look at each system as unique, and then based on the observations and the work done to define the problem and to understand the system, then you would develop a methodology based on that. So each time would actually be a little different.
Thank you. That's very enriching. Others?
I would just echo what Suha said about the framework. You know, there's a lot of them out there, and I would just encourage you to find one that resonates with you. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. You just need to practice.
You know, another thing we might think of that ties right into Suha's and Tracy's and Aaron's perspective is one thought, this: become very good at asking questions that pertain to one main goal and to connectivity. Ask questions if an initiative is present or about to be thought through. How would this affect where we're going or want to go as an organization would be one question. Another question is, how does this idea require the involvement of multiple parts? If you can ask people and yourself that question as you go forward for change, you've got yourself positioned many steps going forward as you start. Just a thought. Other questions from graduate students or others? Let me pose a question to those assembled, a different question, not just to panelists, but in graduate school, do you see an opportunity for the university to benefit from your idea of change thinking? What might be changed in the graduate program to improve the system?
Which is interesting because I think depending on the program, you know, they're like, my program does solicit feedback at certain intervals. And we do have, of course, course related feedback, but not generally, my experience has not been on the program as a whole until towards the end. So I do think that that's interesting, and they could probably benefit from that perspective. You know, even thinking about, for example, we have a residency requirement every summer, and whether or not it would go virtual and whether or not that would be synchronous or asynchronous, my thought was like, ask the students what would work best for you. So I think that there are ways in which, you know, systems thinking could be used to help programmatically, but I think, Huron, you have a good point. Who should lead that on a programmatic level? Is it the coordinator? Is it the department head? How do you navigate the politics of that as a graduate student or even as a colleague?
And are there power elements as that question comes forth? Many of us habitually gravitate to what we perceive as a power center, typically that would involve ourselves. But let's face it, there are people all around us who, and I will be the first to say, have better ideas than I do, let's say, okay? I mean, somebody will know how it feels. Tracy and I do a lot of work with the thinking of Mary Parker Follett, who basically said, among other things, you owe it to everybody to render your experience accurately so they can see what it is. And what could be truer in our current environment than that? Everybody needs to say, here's how it feels to be who I am. Here's how I see it fitting the whole. It's a question we have to ask. And who can tell us best? Well, we're listening.
And I think also, you know, many times you read like about systems thinking and they tie it to leadership. So Hannah, you were asking, or Kiran, who would lead that? So yeah, it depends on the type of leaders, but if you have an idea, maybe you can propose it and then see how you can move forward with it, how you advocate it. keeping in mind, taking the systems thinking perspective that I'm not here to impose an idea, I'm here to get us all together on this kind of same vision.
Excellent.
So maybe you can initiate it, you cannot lead it at where you are now, but you can lead, like I teach, my students, most of my teachers are teachers, and they see themselves as just teaching a classroom. They don't see themselves as part of a system. So when we go through this exercise of how you can introduce change, and they see about, they can start thinking about the relationship and the different stakeholders involved, they see it from a larger picture, and now they are more encouraged. Yes, they can do it. It's a huge undertaking, but they can do it if they take the systems thinking perspective. So it's not easy, and because it brings a lot of chaos, of conflict, of people who don't want to let go of the way they do things. So it's not an easy thing, but it's a good thing to have.
I sense from what you're saying, Suha, that you see other people as resources. And while that may seem like a simple observation, it's a fundamental mental model that says those around me know a lot of things, and I'd like to hear about them.
Sure, because if you think I'm going to lead the change, I know best, and this is where we're going to do it. This is not systems thinking. Systems thinking is like, we have a problem and maybe this is a solution. What do you think the solution should be? Bringing everybody on the same page, having the same vision so you can move forward together. You cannot come and impose something on the group or the system and think that's going to succeed.
Well said. It's a whole new construct of leadership, isn't it?
Yeah, and speaking of leadership, I would say, at least in organizations of higher ed, leadership, they often lead through committees. And one of the things that I have observed is that there's a lot of groupthink in higher ed committees, and a lot of patting each other on the back and saying, this is the great initiative.
Yeah.
To soliciting feedback, but they interpret their feedback or discount feedback that is contrary to their mental mode. And it isn't just the people that we're trying to lead change with in the lower areas of the university or organization, but it's also changing the mindset of those in leadership.
Well said. I noticed Ilkan has a question. We have meetings with the dean once a semester. That might be a good place if you have such a thing to ask for it, I believe, and surely valid point. Whenever the other thing about change initiatives we've observed is if there's a structure in place for anything at all, if you can possibly employ that structure, it can help you start at a higher level than inventing a whole new process, shall we say. And here's another comment from Pauline saying, what's also important is that the attempts to make changes should allow us to participate in making the change, participatory planning process, not just, hey, can we do this? But I'd like to offer my services. Here's what I could do in this thing we've all just said could help us. It's a kind of a nice iterative way of belonging and shaping.
Yeah, and then maybe, building on what you said, Sheila. So Hannah, if you want to propose an idea, it has to be in response to a problem. This is what systems thinking is about. You cannot just because I have this great idea, let's do it. It has to be responding to some situation that you want to improve. So this is also important.
I think it's also important to look for the change leaders or the change agents in your organization. You don't want to go to someone and say, I have this great idea, and that person is really stuck in their ways and they shoot you down, and it can really wreak havoc on your self-esteem. You want to look for someone who is not change averse to really start that initiative with that person.
To both of your points, defining the problem from multiple viewpoints can be quite not just enriching, but also confirmatory. So we see what it is that people say is the opportunity or issue or change or problem, and we see it, and then now it may take on a new hue. It may in fact be something we didn't even recognize fully at first as we hear the different views, and now we have an automatic buy-in to something beyond what each of us had, which is very exciting because we can go higher. and it can be very enriching, I suspect.
Yeah, thank you all. That was excellent. Thank you. And I love the idea of a participatory planning process.
Oh,
that is an excellent idea. The more people, my experience has shown me that the more people, leading by committee can be difficult, especially in higher ed. Getting, if there is not groupthink taking place, getting people to agree, you can go round and round and round and round again in circles and never really move forward. Yes. But, there is such a value in having those other perspectives in making those decisions. One of my favorite things, like right now, we work very closely. I work in a Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning with IT. We work closely with faculty. We're actually under the provost office, et cetera. So any sort of initiative that comes out of our office, we have to really think about who it's going to affect. And is it going to require IT support? Do we have the resources to support that? Do they have the resources, et cetera? And my favorite thing to say to people right now when saying, hey, we need to make this change, faculty will like this, students will like this. My favorite thing to say is, well, have you asked them what they like, what they see the problem as? And honestly, most of the time, no one has asked those stakeholders. So we're trying to solve problems that may not necessarily be a problem because we haven't gotten those outside perspectives. And this is something that the idea of change theory and systems theory has really helped to sort of focus me in that direction.
That's really excellent, Hannah. And I think that, we can avoid groupthink by knowing directly and giving people an opportunity to say specifically what's true for them. I really appreciate the opportunity for us to do this together today. And I would like to thank certainly the Division of Systems Thinking and Change and all of the panelists and graduate students who've been present here today. This is a lovely opportunity to have a good conversation that means a lot, certainly to me, and you've shared wonderful perspectives. Hannah, do you have any other concluding comments?
Sure. For those of you, especially those in GSA, who have not really gotten involved in the division yet, STC is a great division to get involved in. They're very active. Samantha, I know that your book club was particularly popular this year, and you all even had the author come, correct? Yes. So that tends to be something. You all are a very active division. And I know that you all have also created a micro-learning artifact that sort of goes through the basics of systems change. So if anyone's interested in that information, I'll be glad to direct you as to how to access that. But definitely, if you're interested in having more conversations with, brilliant people such as Suha, Samantha, Aaron, Sheila, Tracy, definitely come hang out, get to know everyone. It's been really enriching for me to just sit back and listen in a lot of the meetings that I've attended because they are just so open and smart and they have such interesting perspectives. And I want to thank them all so much for agreeing to participate and bring, honestly, the gospel of systems thinking and change to graduate students like us. So we really appreciate it and really value you all.
Thank you very much.
Lost horribly. Thanks for having us, but I don't know that we're all that smart. At least I am not all that smart.
I don't know if my head's going to fit through the door.
I think it should be, you should give consideration to your brilliance and do not forget it because we notice it. And I thank you all very much. It's really quite exciting. And thank you, Hannah, for intelligently recognizing that we must spread the, to use your word, the gospel of systems thinking and change. Let's get some other people involved with us because we have a lot to share and be proud of. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Hannah, for doing such an exceptional job of organizing this.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you again. Thanks, Suha. Thanks, Samantha. Thanks, Aaron. Thank you to all the participants.
Thanks for being here, everyone.
Thank you. I do want a shameful plug. Please join us. It's a very active organization and small enough that you won't get lost.
And even though we can't be together this year, we're going to be virtually very active. So
great way to be.
Join in.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Now I leave.